I am super excited and delighted to be joined by Penny and James today. So Penny Tompkins and James Lawley are presenting the Masterclass for the 2024 NLP conference, and their topic is Less is More, a clean approach to mind, metaphor and modelling. Now that already sounds really, really exciting. So, Penny and James, thank you very much for joining me today.
Thank you.
And
welcome.
Please do tell us a little bit more about yourselves and your presentation.
Okay. Well, we met on a practitioner training in 1991 in London. Wow. And we attended our first master practitioner in 1992, and then went to Santa Cruz NLP University for trainers training. Now, unexpectedly, we got married on the campus of Santa Cruz University during that training. And the person who married us was Todd Epstein, who was Robert Dilt's training partner at the time. Perhaps a little known fact about NLP is the early NLPers in Santa Cruz couldn't practice NLP with clients unless they were licensed by the state of California. So Todd and several of the early NLPers became non-denominational ministers because ministers could work with people in a counseling, coaching context. So they became non-denominational ministers. And Todd, for some reason, had kept his license up all of these years. So he was still licensed to marry people and asked if he could marry us.
That's beautiful.
So that's a little known fact about how the early NLPers got to practice with people. And we had a lovely, lovely wedding there. And Robert, Judith, everyone came, the Come As You Are congregation from the training. Then later in 1993, we were on the first ANLP psychotherapy and counseling section. And with others in that group, we were instrumental in getting NLP psychotherapy recognized by the United Kingdom Council for Psychotherapy, the UKCP. This is a national register of all recognized psychotherapies in the UK, and it is a feather in the cap of NLP psychotherapy to be included on their list. And we're still there today.
Absolutely.
So that's a bit about our NLP background. And
perhaps you should mention about David Grove, Penny.
And I just was about to do that. In 1993, we were sitting at home and a friend called and said, there's a guy speaking at Regent's College. He's interesting. I think you ought to go if you can. So we did, and that's the first time we saw David Grove on stage working with clients. And I couldn't really understand why he was asking these funny questions of people, and they were getting amazing responses. And so it stayed with me, what I saw that night. But it wasn't until 2 years later that we tracked David down and trained with him and started to model what he was doing, essentially.
Oh, yeah. What an amazing experience that is, because of course, sadly, David passed away a few years ago, didn't he? So
he did.
Yeah.
Unexpectedly.
In 2008. And, you know, that was one of those defining moments where everything in our life kind of shifted, and it took us 4 years to kind of do that modeling project. It was so complicated, and we were learning what we were doing as we went along. But effectively, everything that we've been doing since then has stemmed from that work. Of understanding how David Grove was doing it, and then taking his model, which was a therapeutic model, and expanding it out so that it could be used in business, in education, and all other different applications, research as it is today.
Of course, you've done a lot of that side of things as well, haven't you? You've been involved in all of those elements.
Yeah, well, we kind of, the way it kind of works is we often get involved at the beginning and we support our other people, colleagues who are involved in those more directly in that area. And then once they've got enough skills and everything, then we back out and they carry on and keep developing the field, and we go look for other fields to plant seeds in. And so far, there are lots and lots of fields. We haven't run out of fields.
And lots of beautiful flowers, I would imagine, and crops as a result of the seeds you've planted.
Amazing, yeah, amazing. We could never have envisaged back then and what would come of this, but it's become our life's work, and as far as we know, it will continue to be our life's work. There's still plenty more richness to come out of the model.
And of course, for those who don't appreciate it, that the model we're talking about here is clean language, isn't it? That was what David specialized in, was that clean language approach, which I've been on the receiving end of it. I can understand the strange questions that sometimes come out of it. So this presentation for the conference, less is more. Do tell us more about that.
Okay, so perhaps what might be useful, I mean, clean language gets used as a kind of name for the whole thing, right? But actually, the way we think about it is clean language is actually the behavioral part. It's what you say and what you do, the questions and the way you deliver them. And in and of itself, clean language needs a process, an approach. So symbolic modeling, for example, is one approach that uses clean language. David Grove had his own kind of what he called metaphor therapy. There was intergenerational healing, all these different approaches that made use of clean language. Right. And so our clean space is another one that people might be familiar with, but they use the clean methodology, the clean principles. And what we concentrate on is this one we call symbolic modeling. And, we didn't come by that name accidentally. We deliberately wanted the word modeling in the name because fundamentally, it is a modeling methodology. And that's one of the things that makes it different from traditional kinds of coaching and therapy approaches. Yeah. And so that what we want to do at this in the masterclass is, rather than just kind of pick a little bit out or a little bit, is try and give people a sense of the whole process. How does it all work? When you see a session, it kind of has this natural flow that you don't realize at the beginning because you don't know where it's going, but it's taken with you. You get taken with it, and we want people to see that flow, that arc of the whole session. And so we'll be doing that by demonstrating the components of symbolic modeling, which, as you say, is clean language is the fundamental element. But another key one is the use of people's metaphors, the client's metaphors. And when David Grove started doing that back in the 80s, believe me, that was revolutionary. Another key part of this, the element is the kind of modeling that we do. And as a result of that work with David, we developed a different kind of modeling to some of the other ones that had already been used by Bandler and Grinder and Dilts and all the other greats. And then the last thing is we've introduced a particular kind of outcome orientation into the method. And so those four are the kind of key components, but what we're trying to show is how they all fit together and how people can make use of all of those to facilitate clients to access their creativity, access their inner wisdom, make the changes they need to do to have better lives and happier, more fulfilled lives.
You wouldn't want that. I mean, it sounds like it's going to be incredibly powerful, and to have that whole big picture, but also condensed down into a day, that's going to be, I think, just mesmerizing and really, really informative for everybody. So so thank you for explaining that a bit more clearly. So well, you've kind of already partly explained, but what practical learnings are delegates going to take away from this session?
Well, obviously, clean language, which when doing less can achieve more, is how we think about it. Because at any moment in a coaching or therapy session, you could ask 100 different questions. So there's a big selection issue. So how do you know which of the 100 great questions to ask? And what's unusual about clean language is at its core, there are 8 basic questions that get asked about 80% of the time. So in other words, 4 out of 5 of our questions are drawn from those 8 basic ones. So selecting from 8 is a lot easier than selecting from 80. And this will give you more capacity to see what's happening for the client, to model the client's inner world, and to respond to what's happening right there in front of you in the moment as it's happening. So that is something that will be paramount at the masterclass. And as part of that, we'll also point out how you deliver those clean language questions need to have oomph. So a person can ask a question in one way and the client practically yawns, and you can ask it in another way with oomph. And that question goes right over into the client's space, goes right over there into their metaphors and symbols, and then something different happens.
Right.
So that's something we're going to pay attention to.
So, yeah, I mean, anyone who had the privilege of watching David Grove will understand how he was a master of using his voice and his intonation and his whole body to ask his questions. And I was on the receiving end of them many times, and I can tell you, as Penny said, they go in a different way. So we'll be demonstrating that. And then, I mean, one of the fascinating things I just want to point out about this work is those 8 questions are the same 8 questions we identified back in the 1990s, and they're the same 8 questions that we use today. They are still the core of everything we do. And what makes them so special is that they are universally clean. They can be asked almost anywhere, in almost any context, and without contaminating the other person's experience. And what's remarkable is David spent 25 years looking for clean language questions, and he found so few. There are so few questions which do not put in some of the coach or the therapist's own beliefs, often not deliberately, but under the surface by implication. And it's, to me, it's a remarkable fact how few of those questions actually exist. Yeah. But then what's remarkable is how much you can do with them. And one of the reasons that makes this process still exciting to me after 25 years is what you can do with those questions when you work directly with a person's metaphors.
Right.
And it's still not commonly realized how much we make use of metaphor. In the last 40 years, the cognitive scientists have understood that a lot of our thinking, the way we think, the way we make sense of the word, is at its root metaphorical. Much of our language, much more than we realize, even in everyday conversation, is metaphorical. Yeah. And what David Grove's genius did was to pick out those bits and start asking clean language questions about them. And in particular, people use metaphor when they want to describe something that's really important to them, when they want to describe inner feelings, when they want to describe things that you can't easily put into words because it's too complex how do you describe a relationship with someone? I mean, there's such a complex thing. It's got a million parts, but you can give it a metaphor. You can say, well, you know, my relationship is a bit like a rubber band. They pull one end, I go over, and I pull the other end, they come over to me. But we stretch it. If we stretch it too far, it's going to break. I mean, encompassed in that one single metaphor then is a whole history of that person's relationship. And what's fascinating about metaphors is, my guess is you instantly have some sense of what kind of relationship they're talking about. Is that fair to say?
Yes, absolutely. And it's honed in, isn't it? So beautifully like that. It's yes, I immediately went to, oh, what would my metaphor be for a relationship?
Exactly, yes. Well, that's the kind of things where people will access their own metaphors on this, and they'll get asked clean language questions by the group, the peers, and they'll get to discover not only what their metaphors, but the depth and the richness, and how they, when you get one of those metaphors, it kind of goes, yeah, this is what I'm trying to say. This is what I mean. Yeah. So we'll be people will take away an enhanced understanding of metaphor and how to make direct use of it. Let's think, what else? I mean, the whole notion of modeling, you know, was the core. NLP came out of modeling. It was the core of all the things that was done at the beginning. It's been the core of some of the great developments in NLP in the last 40 years. And yet I still feel it's a bit undervalued. And one of the reasons, I think, is because it's actually quite a skill. It's not one thing. It's a whole range of skills. It's a way of thinking and relating to another person's inner world, and it takes some training. I mean, we were all natural modelers when we were children, but we now, as adults, have to learn how to do it. And so what people will get in this masterclass is some enhanced modeling skills, which will give them the ability to relate to and understand another person's inner world in a way that means they can ask questions of it that make sense instantly to the other person without having to try to change it. And that's one of the big differences. What happens if you don't try and change the other person's experience?
Yeah.
So out of that, let's think of it. What, you know, it's so hard. It's so much easier. Why are we going to demonstrate? Because it's so much easier when you see this to happen. But the other thing that cognitive scientists have really discovered is how abstract and metaphorical concepts and ideas are grounded in the body. They're grounded in the way the body relates to the environment, to what's going on around it. And so the more we can make use of that embodiment, it seems to me the more people are going to have grounded experiences. And so what the clean language and metaphor does is enable people to have very embodied experiences during the session, get in touch with and understand.
And while the body is often enacting those metaphors, then using symbolic modeling will show you how you can incorporate those nonverbal expressions in this client living in the experience they're describing, how we incorporate those. And this, when we can do that, this is when all sorts of spontaneous, serendipitous things can happen that surprise the client and stimulate their creativity and that inner wisdom we talked about earlier. This is when a landscape can become psychoactive, and that is a fascinating thing to be part of.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, just hurry up and let's get to next May. I mean, it's just, I am so excited by what you're saying. And when you were saying, James, about, and I thought, you know, modeling, I'm fortunate, I'm so lucky. I've got a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old grandchildren. and I watch them, and they model each other and adults so beautifully. And I found myself thinking, where does that go? Where does that ability? But I think it's like so much that it kind of, I don't know where it disappears to, but we unlearn that stuff, and it's such a shame that we unlearn it.
Yeah, and you know, without going too far off the topic, I do think that happens in our school system, that we undervalue this way of making sense. It's a learning process. We undervalue that, and we go much more for the head stuff and the cognitive, you know, answers. And modeling doesn't work that way. It's more an absorption of another person's way of doing things, and later you can then draw out the cognitive stuff. But if you go for the cognitive first, you know, you miss some of that kind of intuitive kind of modeling that children are doing. They don't know what they're doing, they're just doing it.
They just do it. Exactly. It's beautiful.
Yeah.
So, I mean, as I said, I'm really excited and would like it to be next May now. However, it's not. And so what can delegates do beforehand to get a sort of, to give them a deeper experience during this masterclass? Not that 6 hours will be a deep enough experience anyway, but what else can they do?
Good question. On our website, cleanlanguage.com, on the front page, there are introductory articles on that homepage in the context of coaching, health, education, business, and just read through those articles on that homepage, and you'll get a sense of how symbolic modeling and clean language work in these contexts. Then also there is a book called Innovations in NLP, and edited by Shelley Rose Charvet and Michael Hall. And in chapter 4, there's a chapter, a précis of the symbolic modeling process. And I believe we will supply you with that chapter, and you will make it available for people. Read that chapter, and you will get the, as I say, the overview of what we're going to be doing on that day, and what then you'll be more able to track the stages that we're going through and have more your own embodied sense of what we're talking about. And of course, finally, to familiarize yourself with the basic clean language questions. And those will be provided to you as well in advance, and be in that article. And the chapter, and practice asking the clean language questions, and practice by being asked the clean language questions. Find someone and learn how to use your voice, learn how to remember the client's exact words that make up the other part of a question that is a clean language question. You really need to kind of exercise your attention to pick up those clients' exact words and use them in every question that you ask. And the more you can do that and kind of get the rhythm with it. David Grove studied poetry, and he became very interested in iambic pentameter. And so you will notice those clean language questions have an inherent rhythm with them that you can ask them, and it's trancy, but clients don't realize it, and it's very comforting as well. So also to read, what do we mean by metaphor? And you'll get that in that chapter 4 of Innovations as well. What do we mean by metaphor? What kind of metaphors are we talking about? I know the long name for them is autogenic metaphor, which means client generated, but it's really useful to get a sense of that. So those are 3 things that they can do beforehand to be well prepared for our talk.
Wonderful. We all like a bit of home play, so I'll get straight onto that. Thank you. And yes, we will make sure that those resources are shared, certainly with delegates and with those with others as well. So thank you for providing us with those. So I mean, for my final question which is slightly different, because obviously when it comes to the conference masterclass, we invite you to be the masterclass presenters by invitation only. Make it sound really, really important. But so what inspired you to say yes when you were invited to present the 2024 masterclass?
Well, it's interesting because we first presented at the ANLP conference way back in 1992, and we've done lots of presentations of workshops since then. We're very pleased to say, but we actually haven't done anything at the ANLP conference for, I don't know, 2019, I think, which will be 5 years. Yeah. Since we last gave a presentation. So we want the people who've been around NLP for a long time, the new generation of people who are coming into NLP all the time, we wanted them to have a chance to find out how a model, how it's developed. For those who knew about it, maybe 20 years ago, it's developed, come on a long way. And so we wanted a chance with them to be able to present the kind of latest incarnation, if you like, of our work and how we've managed to simplify it down. Now we've really got to the S. It's taken us a long time, but we've got to the essence of how this process works, and we wanted to share that with the people, the delegates to the conference. Do you want to add anything, Penny?
I just will mention that a working definition of NLP, as long as I've been involved, has been, it is the study of the structure of subjective experience. And I cannot think of a method that fits better into that definition than what we do, because metaphors have a structure, and that structure corresponds to that which it represents. And Lordy, they are subjective. So that just came to mind when I was thinking about all of our background in NLP, and that I still feel like it's very comfortable within that definition for us.
Absolutely. And I think as well, you've hit on because when you were explaining more about the questions and everything earlier, I was thinking this is equally applicable to people who are new in the field, and those who've been here for a long, long time. So I think, being able to empower across the range of NLP professionals is wonderful, to be able to distill that and distill that many, many years of modeling and work into something that can be taken and used by those new in the field, used by those who've been around for a little while. It's a very empowering thing to do, and so we're so grateful that you did say yes, and you are delivering the masterclass for next year's conference. So is there anything else you'd like to add?
Well, I'm looking forward to it.
Absolutely.
It's like going back to my roots of NLP, and so it'll be good to be back in the fold, shall we say. I think COVID kind of knocked us from, and everybody, but I feel like we're all kind of coming back to the roots and back into the environment that we're so familiar with.
Absolutely, and presenting in person at our new venue, the Sheraton Skyline. So we're excited to be in a new venue for next year, and to have you there for the whole day on Saturday, the 11th of May, 2024. So weekend as well. So people will hopefully be able to get there. We are live streaming the masterclass as well. So if people are much further afield and can't do the traveling, then the whole event will be live streamed as well. So it's absolutely possible for anybody to attend. And yeah, I am really looking forward to having you present at the masterclass next year. Also, just to mention, there are 2 taster sessions that you're very kindly going to do for us as well. They are going to be free and open to anybody to attend. You don't have to be a delegate. It's sort of almost like a try before you buy. and one is in November and one is in March. So do keep an eye on the website and on the social media and all that sort of thing, where we'll be able to promote more about that and tell you more about that at the time. So really, thank you so much, James and Penny. Really looking forward to the masterclass, even more than I was before. And I think your words and being able to explain it and talk about it, it just brings it to life and makes so much more sense of it. So thank you so much for your time today.
Thank
Thank you.